Good afternoon and welcome to Join the Movement, a virtual series highlighting the compassion, peace, and justice ministries of the Presbyterian Mission Agency. Today, we are focusing on the Presbyterian Committee on Mission Responsibility through Investment, better known as MRTI. It was created in recognition of the Presbyterian Church USA's unique opportunity to advance its mission faithfully and creatively through the financial resources entrusted to it. I'm Darla Carter of the Presbyterian News Service, and we have three special guests here with us today. The first is the Reverend Carrie Allen, who chairs MRTI. Welcome, Carrie.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Our second guest is Rob Four, who is Director of Faith-Based Investing and Corporate Engagement for Peace USA. He's also the lead staff person for MRTI. Welcome, Rob.
Thanks, Darla. Great to be here.
Welcome. And our third guest is Katie Carter. She is Associate for Research Policy and Information in the Office of Faith-Based Investing and Corporate Engagement. Welcome, Katie.
Thanks so much, Darla.
Glad to have you here. Before we get into our questions, I am going to show a video, which is a great explainer of what MRTI does. So let's take a moment to watch.
What is MRTI? MRTI stands for the Committee on Mission Responsibility through Investment. Through MRTI, the Presbyterian Church pushes businesses to adopt practices that are not harmful to the environment, better for workers, prevent human trafficking, and more. These align with Presbyterian values and with how Christ calls us to take care of the world and each other. How does it work? MRTI is a committee created by the General Assembly of the Presbyterian Church, whose members represent 6 GA-related entities. MRTI also has staff who handle most of the conversations conducted with businesses and their leadership. This is done through using the shares held in the portfolios of the Presbyterian Foundation and the Board of Pensions. Both of those agencies hold stock in companies to use the earnings to benefit the PCUSA through funding retirement beneficiaries and funding important mission work. Holding stock in a company gives a shareholder the unique ability to bring attention to key issues. How does MRTI choose the companies? Companies are selected because these companies have practices or policies that are out of alignment with PCUSA values. The investing agencies of the PCUSA hold stock in the companies. We work in coalitions to join forces with other faith and values-based investors. Does it work? Yes. Often companies do change their practices. MRTI has a rigorous process for evaluating select companies, color-coding companies after thoroughly researching their business practices. MRTI actions have successfully moved companies in the right direction many times since it started in 1972. Here are a few examples. Helped bring pressure to end the apartheid regime in South Africa. Hotel chains and airlines have trained staff at all levels on how to spot and prevent human trafficking. Companies are committing to more transparency of their lobbying efforts related to climate change issues. What happens when it doesn't work? If a company doesn't respond to our letters, phone calls, and invitations to meet, MRTI may recommend that the agencies of the Presbyterian Church USA sell stock in the company and not buy any more stock in those companies. This is called divestment. This is an important tool, and it's the last tool of shareholder engagement. It is always our hope to influence corporations to be better actors for people and for the planet. When we walk away, we lose that influence. This may be warranted if companies make inadequate effort to change. But it is always our goal to cause lasting change in business practices that make a positive impact on people and planet. Want to know more? You can find more information on the MRTI website at presbyterianmission.org/MRTI.
Foundation for that wonderful video. I think it's one of the best explanations I've ever seen of what MRTI does. You all deal with lots of complicated topics, so we really appreciate having that today. Now that we've seen that video, let's dive into our questions. And the first question is, earlier this year, the PMA board approved a recommendation from MRTI that Peace USA divest from 5 fossil fuel companies. The proposal is going to be moving, of course, to the GA, the General Assembly, this summer. And I'd like you to just explain a little bit about how you arrived at the decision to recommend that these energy companies be divested from. And I know this is something that is not taken lightly. It takes a lot of evaluation. Is that correct?
Thanks, Starla. Yes, that's absolutely correct. It is not a decision that we took lightly. And as a matter of fact, we really engaged in a rigorous process over a number of years. So that included engagement with the corporations that we're recommending. That included engagement with impacted communities. That included visits to frontline communities that have been impacted by climate change in South Louisiana and in Southwest Detroit. In addition to meeting with folks who are employed by the energy industry and who will be impacted by and whose companies will be impacted by this divestment. So Presbyterians and others who work for the various companies that we are making these recommendations for. The only other thing I'd like to share before Rob also shares some additional details is this divestment does not mean that our work is done. Climate change is going to be with us, and we have responsibilities as Christians to continue to fight climate change. And to have an impact on turning the corner on climate change.
Thank you so much, Carrie. Rob, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I'll add a little bit more to that. And Carrie did a really good job, as she always does, of illustrating the real life examples of MRTI following its policies and following the policies of the General Assembly. So in this particular case around divestment, MRTI is guided by a policy that was adopted by the 196th General Assembly in 1984, back when apartheid was the issue of the day. This policy was developed and is really as a framework for how the Presbyterian Church can do divestment and how the investing agencies, the Presbyterian Foundation and the Board of Pensions of the PCUSA, can implement a divestment recommendation under certain circumstances and still be in compliance with all of their policies and their fiduciary duty and whatnot. So as the video mentioned, as kind of Carrie mentioned as well, divestment is not nowhere in our policies is divestment the goal of the policy stated by the General Assembly, and really it's when the General Assembly states a value, a particular value or set of values, and then gives MRTI the committee the directive to go engage on those values and try to bring companies that are held in the portfolios of the Board of Pensions and Foundation more in alignment with those values. Okay. So there in that policy, the divestment policy, there are 7 criteria that need to be met before MRTI can make a divestment recommendation. So give a quick overview of the last 8 years of General Assemblies. MRTI has had environmental responsibility as one of its founding goals since its inception 50 years ago. So MRTI has been working on environmental responsibility and climate change in all of its predecessor names, such as global warming, and I believe it was called atmospheric fluctuations back in the 80s. But have been working on that and working with oil and gas companies. But it really wasn't until 2014 when the first overture started coming to the General Assembly recommending that the Board of Pensions and Foundation do categorical divestment from from fossil fuel companies, that MRTI really got focused in a way that we have been on over the last 8 years on climate change. So the issue, again, guided by the policy of the General Assembly and the 7 criteria. One of the things that MRTI had to do in those early days after the 2014 recommendation is look at what existing policy was out there. What did the General Assembly have? And unsurprisingly, the General Assembly's got a lot of great policy on environmental responsibility and climate change issues, the most comprehensive of which was passed by, I believe it was the 218th General Assembly in 2008, called the Power to Change. Very comprehensive, robust policy. MRTI, however, found a gap in that policy, which there was no mention or guidance around in Presbyterians or the investing agencies related to the Presbyterian Church owning stocks, oil and gas and coal stocks. So MRTI needed to go back to the General Assembly and say, okay, we need some additional policy guidance. And that happened in 2016. And the guidance was basically, it didn't say this exactly, but it basically was companies need to be moving their operations towards achieving the goals of the Paris Agreement, which is keeping average global warming to well below 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. So MRTI was able to, from that kind of paragraph of policy guidance, able to develop a framework, which my colleague Katie will talk about in a minute, what we call the guideline metrics framework, to achieve that precision and that measurement. That is to say, how do we know if particular companies are moving towards Paris compliance or moving away from Paris compliance? So we developed that between 2016 and 2018. And in 2018, MRTI went back one more time to the General Assembly and said, okay, so here's our framework based on the guidance you gave us. Is it right? And if so, we need some particular companies to apply this to, because our divestment policy requires MRTI to do engagement with particular companies, named companies. So the General Assembly said, yes, this is the framework we want you to evaluate, by which we want you to evaluate companies. And here are the 9 companies. And the 9 companies that were passed by the 223rd General Assembly in 2018 were companies that were also included on the Climate Action 100 Plus list. Now, the Climate Action 100 Plus is an initiative. It's one of the largest investor initiatives ever assembled. It currently, I think, has something like 700 institutional investors, of which the PCUSA through MRTI was one of the early, and it boasts now of $68 trillion of assets under management. And the goal of this coalition is to move the 167 largest publicly traded emitters of greenhouse gases towards compliance with the Paris Agreement. So MRTI recommended 9 companies, I believe 6 of which were oil and gas companies, 1 utility company, and 2 automobile companies, for focused engagement with possible selected divestment recommendations. And so in 2020, when even though the General Assembly was not held in the kind of the regular way because of the COVID-19 pandemic, MRTI did actually recommend 3 companies, given that framework that was affirmed 2 years earlier. And since all the business was referred to the 2022nd General Assembly, MRTI is now recommending 5 companies. And to get specific about that, I'll invite Katie to talk about our guideline metrics framework.
Thank you, Rob.
As Rob mentioned, these guideline metrics were established in 2017 and approved by the General Assembly in 2018. And it measures company performance across dozens of indicators, looking at issues in environmental, social, and governance categories, with a heavy weight towards climate change issues. And we measure companies using their own public disclosures and reports. We use information from our own dialogues and engagements, and the engagements of our partners. We also take into account research from third-party analysts. And as Rob mentioned, 3 companies that scored the lowest or scored in the red category in 2020, MRTI recommended for divestment. And then in 2022, this year, MRTI escalated its directive and it is recommending 5 companies for divestment. So companies falling in the red category and orange category. There's also a yellow category, blue and green. Green is the highest, is for the highest scoring companies, red is for the lowest. And those companies that MRTI is recommending falling in the red and orange include ExxonMobil, Chevron, Phillips 66, Valero Energy, and Marathon Petroleum.
Thank you very much, Katie. What is the likelihood of these recommendations being passed by GA, and how might that be affected by any overtures that are being brought forward from others?
Yeah, well, we hope the likelihood is high because this is, again, as we kind of mentioned before, is really we're following our policies, down to the I, dotted the I, crossing the T's. So a couple of things just about the other overtures that are coming. The thing that is consistent over the last couple of General Assemblies anyway is that there's no debate around the urgency of the climate crisis. No one is debating the science. Nobody is saying that climate change isn't real or isn't an urgent threat. I mean, everyone, all these the MRTI recommendation as well as these other overtures recognize that the climate crisis is the one of the most pressing issues of our time and most pressing threats to our species and all of life on God's planet. That said, the MRTI report, in part of the selected divestment recommendations, yes, they follow the divestment policy, which MRTI has to be guided by, but they also interact with the policies of the Board of Pensions and the Presbyterian Foundation for an implementation of a divestment recommendation. So in order for the investment agencies to implement a divestment recommendations, two things need to happen. One, MRTI needs to make a recommendation per the 1984 policy criteria, per those 7 steps in the 84 policy. So that's number one. Number two, the General Assembly has to agree with MRTI's recommendation. That is, the General Assembly has to review it and say, yes, MRTI followed the appropriate steps and did its work correctly, and this outcome is the right and appropriate application of GA policy. When those two things happen, then the investing agencies will then consider a divestment list, which MRTI produces every year, and MRTI would, if the General Assembly agrees with the MRTI recommendation, MRTI would add those 5 companies onto the General Assembly's divestment list. And it would be historic because it would be the first time that companies have been out of line of our environmental policy, which was just established in 2018. So that would happen, and then the boards of the investing agencies would consider these divestment lists, and if every company on there meets the criteria that I just mentioned, which is just went through the 84 policy, and per the MRTI recommendation, and then the General Assembly agreed, then they would adopt this list in full, and they would tell their managers to sell the stocks of any new companies that are added to this list. So that is really important, and that is really crucial that the MRTI recommendation really needs to pass unaltered in order for the investing agencies to implement a divestment recommendation. Now, with respect to the other overtures, depending on how they're worded, they could pass alongside the MRTI recommendation. Again, depending on how they're worded, and what those really need to be is the MRTI recommendation needs to be unaltered, and the anything that goes above and beyond the MRTI recommendation needs to be worded in kind of aspirational terms, which there are at least a couple that are, and can't be overly prescriptive, so that they would violate or be out of compliance with existing policies, which all need to kind of interact with each other. I don't know if Carrie, if you want to say a few more things about that.
Yes. Just to kind of boil down what Rob said is that there are overtures that really kind of like set out the vision for what we see, what we hoped to happen in the future, and then there are also overtures that could actually thwart the ability for our investment agencies to divest. And so the way that you can kind of pay attention to that is to look at the comments and the comments on the report and the other overtures. It's really important to know that part of, like, I sit on MRTI as a representative from the Advocacy Committee for Women's Concerns. So in my work, I really bring gender justice framework and lens to how we look at these. REAC and AC Swap also have representation on the committee. So there are multiple eyes from a justice perspective, very particular justice perspectives, that are involved in the whole process, that over the years are involved in the process with this different foci. So check out those advisory and advocacy committees comments that are shared on the overtures. And, you know, our goal here is really to impact the trajectory of climate change because of the urgency of the issue, and not just to make a statement. The prophetic statement is really critical. And so we have an opportunity to do that, and also to make a statement to businesses about how they do business to see and impact change.
Thank you so much, Carrie. I wanted to ask, who are your partners in this work? Are you out front when it comes to divestment? Are there other faith-based organizations that are making similar recommendations? I know you have a long-term relationship with ICCR. Can you talk a little bit about these things?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, so the Presbyterian Church was actually a founding member of the Interfaith Center on Corporate Responsibility, or ICCR, who also just celebrated its 50th anniversary this last year. And members of ICCR are, you know, as the name suggests, are many faith-based investors that are other denominations, other mainline Protestant denominations, as well as other Roman Catholic, as well as Jewish and Muslim, and the Unitarian Universalists and others, as well as values-based investors who may be values-based asset managers or others. And all told, that coalition is the smallest coalition we work with, and they represent $2.4 trillion of assets under management or thereabouts. With respect to your question about divesting and what others are doing, it really runs the gamut. There are others that have written certain screens around certain activities around, you know, that might be oil sand screens or Arctic screens or coal screens, and others that have screened out other, have gone farther. But what makes the Presbyterian Church somewhat unique in this space is that we're recommending divestment from particular companies for a policy-based, environmental policy-based reason only. So that is, we're not factoring in the financial performance. Now, others of our colleagues and partners, they may divest selectively for a combination of those two reasons, financial performance as well as environmental policy. But again, this is just about environmental policy and saying that we can say and show through our guideline metrics framework that these companies are not moving, or not moving fast enough is probably a better way of saying it, because I want to say that since we've engaged all these companies with this particular framework since 2018, they've all made progress. It's just the question is are they moving fast enough, far enough? And for the 5 that MRTI are recommending, the answer is clearly no. And this is really unique, saying we are recommending these 5 companies for selective divestment for environmental policy reasons only. And then I also want to mention the other big coalition we work with, particularly on climate change issues, is the Climate Action 100 Plus, which we get through our partnership with Ceres, which is a responsible investor coalition, and Katie might talk about that a little bit more in a minute here. But again, this is at latest count 700 institutional investors with $68 trillion of assets under management. Basically making the same ask of the 167 largest emitters of greenhouse gases, saying we need you to move towards Paris compliance, and the time horizon was initially set out by 2023, And many of these companies are moving quickly, and obviously they can do better. Our work is not over, but but are making significant moves towards those achieving those goals. Katie, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about some of our coalition work.
Yeah, I'll just say quickly that Ceres really provides a lot of subject matter expertise for us. For example, we're a member of their policy working group. Our corporate engagement does not happen in a vacuum, and we get a lot of support from folks at Ceres. And in the policy realm, they help us, keep up to date on what's happening at the policy level, particularly as it relates to corporations. And they will help us, give us good questions to ask and figure out how to push these companies on policy advocacy.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Katie. Before I let you go, I would be remiss to not talk about your, I guess, almost completed proxy season, which I understand has been quite successful. Please tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, thanks, Darla. So the proxy season, that is when companies have to publish their proxy statements, and shareholders get a chance to vote on shareholder proposals and other items such as board of directors and whatnot. That really kind of is really in focus at this time of year. Most companies, I think 80% of companies, have their annual general meetings between late April and mid-June or thereabouts. So and for us, that season, or the season, really starts in earnest in the middle of the summer, when we do planning, and then we work with our partners, develop strategies and whatnot. And I think so in 2021, so last proxy season, MRTI, PCOSA through MRTI set a record of leading on 5 proposals, which we've never done that many. Leading on 5 proposals, and in 2021 we were able to withdraw 4 of them in exchange for a significant commitment from the company, and 1 went to vote, and it got a strong majority vote. And what's interesting about that is that has not really been the case with shareholder proposals. Now, but before, about 4 or 5 years ago, on certain issues, especially related to climate risk, getting 50% was very significant. Getting close to that was significant. Last year, 2021, there was just a major tipping point where these climate-related proposals started getting really, really strong majority votes. So, that is, we are very much in it. The Presbyterian Church is in this work for the long game. We've been doing this for 50 years, and I said it only took 50 years for this work to go really mainstream. So, kind of off the back of that, in 2022 season, we were able to lead file on six proposals that related to climate change or climate risk, safer chemical use, human rights risk, and conflict affected and high risk areas. And we were able to withdraw all of those proposals in exchange for significant commitments from the companies. So we were very, very pleased with that.
Yeah, I will just say, just add to that a little bit.
Sure.
The successful season really highlights the importance and the benefits of working with our interfaith and our values-based partners, and really demonstrates how this work is multi-pronged, and how we really are interested in impacting change and have been successful in doing that.
That's wonderful. I'm glad that you are being influential and having a powerful force in this arena. For those individuals who are interested in learning more or want to do more at an individual level or a church level, are there any resources that you could refer them to? And can you tell us the best way to connect with MRTI?
Sure. The best, thanks for that banner here. That's going to our webpage. Everything is up there. But we actually have a section towards the end of at the bottom of our webpage that says "Activate your power as a shareholder," or "Activate your influence as a shareholder." And there, MRTI produces 2 really helpful components, or 2 helpful resources every year. One is our divestment list, which is usually available by late December, and it goes into effect the following January 1st of the next year. So watch for that in the kind of the late 4th quarter. And then the other is our proxy voting recommendations, which is really relevant right now because we're in proxy voting season. And that is MRT has recommendations on hundreds of proposals that are filed by our faith-based and values-based partners. And if an individual or a congregation or a Presbyterian entity has direct shares in those companies, we encourage you to take a look at that and vote your proxy in that way. If you don't have direct, if you have mutual funds or whatever, you can still send those recommendations to your financial advisor and just say you'd like them to vote to the degree that they're able on those recommendations. And thirdly, we have collected over the years a variety of different socially responsible investment policies that have come to us from a congregational level or an entity like a presbytery or something, and we've kind of curated those and kind of made the most the ones we like the best available. So if you want, you can email us and we can send you those and help you develop a social responsible investment policy for your congregation or your entity.
All right, that's wonderful. I want to thank you all for being with us here today. It's been a great conversation. I know I've learned a lot, and I hope our viewers have too. I do want to mention that Carrie and Rob have another appearance coming up. They will be guests on a new weekly offering from the folks who produce A Matter of Faith, a Presby podcast. It's going to be called GA Watch. And you can listen to them on May 16th, and that podcast can be found at buzzsprout.com. So mark your calendars and join them for additional information about this topic. In the meantime, thank you again for being with us, and please go in peace.